Okay, you're back with episode 5, right?
Yeah, I'll take your word for it.
Okay. What's today's topic?
It looks like we're doing, well, I guess we should give the background, right?
Yeah. Give a little background.
Today we're going to talk about tech. Tech because Mom asked me, what's a modem? And I said to her, I think a modem is a thing that used to plug into the computer and talked over the telephone line to the internet. And she said, well, we're paying rent on one. And I said, well, ask Hayden, what is a modem? And she told me you didn't know.
I said it. I knew it had something to do with Wi-Fi, right? What your computers and phone run off of, what you're paying for each month, to access the internet.
Right.
That's all I knew it had to do with. So I didn't know.
And I guess that's not really it. It is it, but it's not it. And the thing was, I thought, because I'm old guy and you're, 16-year-old guy, that you would know all about the tech.
Yeah, but I
what
know
happened?
Some tech, but I don't know everything, obviously. So we kind of got stuck into what is a modem. So we decided to
do a
look it up
podcast
during this podcast.
Based
on tech.
called Tech. Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's called Tech. Let's you've got two generations here. I'm 51 and you're
16,
so
almost 17.
yeah, that's the gist of this podcast that we put out every week. So I guess we delve into it.
Yeah, let's go right into this modem question. I did a general search onto Google. What are modems?
What's a modem?
And it says it's a computer peripheral class. So I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but it says it is a modem or a portmanteau.
A module demodulator.
Yes, modems must just be short. Is a hardware device that converts data into a format suitable for a transmission medium so that it can be transmitted from one computer to another. So it sounds like basically a data transferable device.
The middleman.
Yes.
It's the middleman. It is the thing between the computer and other computers?
The computer, other computers, the internet, the satellite that's beaming that in, or the wire that's bringing it into your house.
And you said it converts data.
It's a hardware device. So it's a device, but this device is converting data into a format suitable for transmission. So it takes the data your computer's sending out and converts it and then transmit it to other computers or the World Wide Web or whatever you're accessing or uploading or downloading.
And apparently I have to rent one from the cable company.
It sounds that way. You are renting one.
She said, do we have to? I said, I don't know.
Not cable company, but your Wi-Fi company.
It's the cable. Cable gives us the internet.
Yes.
So your internet service provider, IPS for short. But the question is do I have to rent it? Should I be able to buy one and have one of my own? I have my own computer. It's not like I rent a computer from the cable company to transfer that data into something that goes into the modem. So
I think you bought a router. Did you buy a router?
I own my own router.
Yes.
I know what the router is. The
Yes.
router is the thing that makes it it makes it so that we can. I don't have to have a bunch of wires hooked up.
Yeah, you have it.
I do it wirelessly.
It's between your internet connection and your local network. Basically, you can't directly connect with the internet with the router because there's too much data there. Your computers could never handle it. Your router must be plugged into this device.
What? Say that again?
Your router, which accesses the World Wide Web, the internet,
Right.
with tons of data that nobody's computer could ever handle except the big Intel ones that they build in skyscrapers, right? On giant buildings. Your router accesses that. Now, your router cannot just directly beam that to your computer, it looks to be.
It does. That's what it does.
No, it does not. It connects to a thing called a modem. A device called a modem, which is...
Oh, yes, okay. No,
and the modem is what's responsible for connecting your computer to the router, which is connected to, the satellite or cable coming into your home with the World Wide Web on it.
So the router takes the wireless signal from my computer and sends it to the modem.
No. Your modem's taking the wireless signal from your computer and sends it to the router.
But I bought a router.
You bought a router, which is the access point to that cable coming in the house.
Where's the modem?
The modem connects to the router.
That's what I said.
Yes. The modem connects to the router, and it takes that cable that comes into the router, the internet,
right,
and compresses it enough to where only small bits are coming through to your computer, basically specifically what you're looking at a time and what you're uploading or downloading.
Okay.
So the modem is basically the middleman of a middleman.
Right. We talked about that a second ago.
Yes.
That's what it looked like. The modem was the middleman between my computer and the internet.
Yes.
And what a router does is allows me to wirelessly connect to the modem.
So the main difference between the two devices is that a modem lets you connect to the internet, while the router distributes that connection to different devices. I had them flipped around, you're right. The router is the part that's distributing it. The modem's connected.
Oh, look, old guy got one up on young
Yep,
dude. Look at that.
I
Okay.
just clicked on another thing that's correct.
Well, my question is, you young guy,
Yes.
how come? And this is the excuse I used when I was talking to your mom. Is when I was your age, I knew, I shouldn't say everything, but I knew about connecting the stereo up to the speakers. I knew about connecting the stereo up to the TV. I knew about connecting wires to devices. I knew about electronics. And this seems like, this is why I threw you under the bus. I said, ask Hayden. It seems like something that you would know.
I'm not very good with interconnectional type things, like connecting to the bigger picture where the companies are basically mandating what you're getting, like the internet company, the cable company. I'm not good with that. I am good with the stuff that you control, like your personal computers and devices. And the user interface is the hardware is a little tricky on me. I'm still learning, but the user interface I'm pretty in depth with.
Well, I could ask you, did I fail you? I mean, how come you're not schooling me and your mom on these terms and these devices? How come you're not saying, yeah, Ma, the modem is a device that allows you to take your data from the Wi-Fi and put it into the internet, Because
I've been more interested in programming.
Right, okay.
I'm more interested in user interface and the code that connects to the hardware. And you learn about the hardware after you learn the code basically, or that's my experience to it. I'm learning these hardware things by looking up, oh, this line of code, what the heck does that do? And then I'll be like, what? There's this device called a modem per se. It's that line of code specifically connecting to that hardware bit, and I don't learn about that hardware bit till I get a problem with my code going, that's wrong. That's not connecting to this hardware, because you get so caught up into it, it's only what's on the screen. Sometimes you think there's a magic gateway for anything, but...
So do you think there's other 16-year-olds right now listening, screaming at the speaker going, ah, Hayden, you moron, you got to do this and that and this?
Well, if there's 16-year-olds listening, no, they probably got better times to do than listen to podcasts.
Well, I expect if they want to get a perspective up against an old guy's perspective on any one of the topics, they might be listening. But you think they are then, huh?
Yeah. I know my friend would absolutely know about modems because he is the Wi-Fi setup for his house. Basically, he sometimes gets his way with the Wi-Fi naughtily, like not in the right sense, by keeping the password from him and stuff because he was the one that set up all that hardware.
Because his parents, they're ignorant to what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Only on one side of his family. The other side is very, very educated in that stuff and can override.
Got it.
But just because he does come from a split family and one side, his dad's side's very techie.
Right.
He probably was experienced to a lot of these things, and when he went over to his other side, which probably doesn't seem to be very techy, they just used him to set it all up from what he had learned.
And that's kind of what I expected here is at some point. I mean, yes, granted, since...
I like to play around with user interface and computers.
Right.
Not necessarily hardware. Because
Well,
you're the one that set up the Wi-Fi.
That's where I was going. Is granted, I set the house up, and it's like, let it go. Here's what we need. The cable guy showed up. He goes, here, plug this in here, and I said, okay. And the internet comes up, and that's as far as my brain wanted to go with it. And I think that's the weird thing is, it happened over time. You know, I used to really take an interest in knowing the new electronics, knowing the new setups, the new stereos, the new TVs, the new computers, all of that crap. But it fell by the way at some point in my life. It just didn't become as necessary, I guess is the right word, to know these things.
Do you know what's cool? In school today, we have whole elective classes based to it, computer science classes, CS, which I take often, and code building and all that stuff. And I've played around with CAD and other
programs on the computer.
Programs that you can play around and basically design whole new concepts with. Some programs you take from nothing and you build something, and others you take something that already exists and cut away from it to make something. Like a sheet of wood, you can cut away.
And that's all stuff inside the computer. Those are software, things that you're messing with. You're not dealing with hardware.
No.
But you kind of need to know it.
You need to know it once you get your programming along in Java, per se. And then it gives error. The computer, let's say the hard drive isn't responding. Well, what's a hard drive? You need to know what a hard drive is to make the programming that you're currently working on the computer, their code, even work. Because if you type in a missed line of code that doesn't string properly, the hardware within the computer won't respond, and you'll have to understand what that hardware is to fix the problem with your interface.
Like with what? A screwdriver and a wrench?
No. You'll have to understand how the hard drive works, basically what connection points it has and where data is being stored and distributed from it to basically make it so the program you're trying to create goes in the correct pathway, or it will never find it'll never find the correct pathway to make that program even work. Because the little copper strings inside of it, it'll go down one that you have it programmed to, and it'll find a path that you don't intend it to go to, and then something's messed up later.
Why the hell does that happen?
Because everything you do on the computer, something is happening physically, but on a very tiny molecular scale. Energy is being transmitted and stored in different places. Though it may not be literally like moving bricks from one side to the table to the next, it's still like that, just with tiny itty bitty molecules that have to show up in the correct places as energy is transferred. Because that's all computers are.
That's what's happening inside the computer.
Yes.
Holy moly.
Yeah, all computers are. Everything you do here is being stored and physically moved from one place to another. As you move your mouse across
on a microscopic scale.
Yes.
Really?
The molecules within
So there's
mouse,
literally there's physical things moving.
There's physical things.
Oh,
As
wow,
I move
never
my mouse
considered
across
that.
the screen,
Right.
There's a bunch of ones and zeros clicking electricity on and off to make the image appear in pixels as the mouse moves across the screen within split seconds. And all the ones and zeros do is 0 means off, 1 means on. That's all it means. With the electricity flowing through the circuit board, or the screen in this case, these pixels, 0's on, or 0's off, 1's on.
That's
And that's what programming does.
the funny thing about that is you start talking about that, my brain starts thinking about it. And what I think about is just a screen, say there's a page open,
Yep.
and I'm looking at a picture and some text next to the picture, maybe describing the picture. And what you described sounds, I guess it happens on such a tiny scale that it makes everything show up in a format that I can understand, that my brain...
That's why user interface that's why I'm mostly interested in user interface, because that's how people understand what they're working with. And that makes it to where the common consumer, like you and me, don't even have to think of the hardware when using it.
Right, and what you said earlier was you didn't understand a modem, what it was, because you're more interested in the inner workings. So you've got a grasp of the inner workings.
So I've got a grasp of code. I'm very amateur still. I'm nowhere near.
Well, yeah, I mean,
professional
of course not.
programmer,
You're 16. Why would you be professional? I mean,
But I do understand that user interface and how those work, and how to create some user interfaces.
what do you mean by create them?
Program them. You program what you see in front of you. You can program, like when you're playing a video game, someone used code to present that to the audience the way it's as. So as you press A for a button, he coded that to when user interface is pressed A on this piece of hardware, what happens on these pixels as data is being streamed across and moved, your character that you're seeing will jump.
I kind of think I get that. Back when I was your age, there was the programming. I don't know if it's the right term, algorithm. That's probably not right. But the thing that we learned in school, I had a class called computers. The computers were big television sets. There was a keyboard. There was a screen. It was black and white, or maybe it was black and green. But we wrote out programs, and I think that's the right word to use. We wrote out programs telling what the screen to display.
Not programs, but commands.
Okay, commands.
So, which they're basically, the programming has already been done to where the programming takes the commands that you're putting into the computer to do something. So you type in not your program, but your command, and then the program does what the command says based on what you've already typed into the program.
I think I'm remembering this. It was called BASIC, and yes, because there was
have
if
mouses
then.
or anything.
Oh no, we didn't
You
have.
just
We
had
just
to
had a
type in that
keyboard,
command
and we would type in. It would be like if number 10 equals 5, then go to 7.
Yes.
And that would make the screen, like we were just doing basic things. We were writing schedules out and things like that. And they would, after you spent hours typing in all these different commands, then the screen would pop up with like these overviews that you write for our podcast.
Yes.
But the thing that I always was so mind blown by is I couldn't just type this out. I had to type a bunch of commands out, which would say, if line 10, then go to line 14, then if not. There were if not statements, there were if then statements, and there were
else ifs.
Yes, and it was basic. That's the name of the language, I think. Does that make sense? Basic, is that not a name of a language?
I don't know a basic language. There might be one out there.
You wouldn't. It was the most basic. So you probably wouldn't. But it took forever just to get the screen to say podcast episode 5 overview.
And yeah, because you think that takes forever. What they used to have to do in the 60s and 70s when they were experimenting with this stuff, creating JavaScript and all that, they'd have punch cards where you'd fill in little dots, and those would be the commands, and you'd slide it through the computer. and the computer would see those little dots and go, "Oh, I've been programmed if I see this array of dots to do such
To
and such
do
and
this."
such." But yeah, and going back to that modem thing, I'm looking up. You said you were renting one.
Right.
Yeah, how much? A month?
Why? Too much. Come on.
Okay.
We probably, what did your mom say?
Like
it's
$5.
$5, okay?
But that
So-
adds up as you
Obviously,
use the internet
yeah.
all the time.
Yes.
But I looked it up, and it says if you have cable internet, you probably rent your modem, which we do. For
Yep.
Between $5 and $10.
Yep.
But with most internet service providers, you can buy your own modem and save those monthly fees. Do you know if our internet provider would allow that?
You know what, they're going to have to, because go ahead and type in for me, how much does a modem cost at Walmart?
Let's see.
Just price one out real fast. That's what I want to know, because this is going to be what kills me.
Like-
oh my God.
It's like $130 if for a nicer one.
Oh my God.
And
Yeah, so
50
waste of money.
bucks for a normal one.
Waste of money. In a year, I can have it paid off. I can have a real nice one in 2 years. I think we've had that one hanging on the wall in there for at least 5 years. So
You
I've
have
bought
this,
it
Yeah.
several times over.
Yep. So to our listeners, buy yourself a
Buy your modem.
Yeah.
Don't rent.
And we're using, what's our internet service provider? TDS or something?
I don't know. Weld County Butthole Service Provider. They
I think
suck.
it's TDS.
Okay, TDS. Where you shouldn't say that, because that's like slander. Maybe it was something else.
I don't know. It was one of the ones around here.
Right. One of the ones. Yeah, and that's the other thing. I've got to tell you. You're stuck using whatever cable service comes into your neighborhood.
That's because it's a direct line, typically.
Need to fix that.
Well, yeah. That
There
technology is very old, and
Need to be competition.
there does that basically it makes it so that company can charge whatever they want if you want internet.
Well, we need to get into the 21st century. I think there's a guy, Elon. He's the rocket man, right? He just sent those rockets into space.
Yeah, SpaceX launched last weekend.
Elon's, one of his thing was to try to get internet to everybody in the world.
Yeah.
And hopefully that happens. I think he sends up satellites all the time.
Yeah.
And he's building a network in space of satellites.
Which would be nice because then you don't have competition where there's just a cable line. You can have it beamed in from
Yeah,
the atmosphere.
exactly. Or the outer atmosphere. Then this company that we have, $60 or whatever it is, and Elon comes by and says, "Oh no, I'll give you better service for $30." That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
And am I crazy for thinking that that's the truth? Is Elon doing that?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Do you want me to look
Well, get on that little thing over there called the computer, type it in,
Elon and the internet?
Elon and internet, ISP. And I think he's doing that. I think I heard somewhere that he is sending up satellites.
SpaceX CEO Elon Musk used internet connection provided by his company Starlink constellation of broadband
That's the one.
satellites
That's the one.
this month. This is
Starlink.
old, obviously.
So look up
He
Starlink.
he put as many as 3,000 more Starlink satellites in orbit on top of a previously planned 12,000. This was planned in October of 22nd of 2019. So
I
he's
think
planning
it's
to
like
put these
30,000 or so
on
satellites.
top of the 12,000 that he.
Well, I think that's the
pre-planned.
total. Yeah, he's just throwing them up there. He's like shooting hoops, man. He's throwing all the satellites up there, and
So
then everywhere on the
Starlink.
planet. That's his goal. Everywhere. Not, how like in rural areas of this country. I mean, a
It'll
first
be
world country.
Made available to customers in Canada and in northern United States in 2020, and additional service expansion to follow other parts of the world throughout 2021.
Yeah, and no, I think that's what I read was his goal was to
Which would be
eventually connect the entire world. You're going to be in North Pole, internet.
That's
You're going to be in
something-
Antarctica, internet.
Yeah.
You have the ability to connect to his network.
That'd be cool.
That would be cool, but kind of scary.
Yeah.
kind of scary.
Well, should we move off of modems and go on to computer components?
Sure.
Basically,
What do you got? What do you
basic
want to talk about?
computers. I was just looking. I wanted to talk about the basic computer components that make up a computer. There are 7 major components. Very easy. This is the very simplest form.
Please
You
don't make my head pop.
Any of the little nitpicky things and all that. The first thing is the power supply.
Core.
Power supply. Yeah, it's literally, it's video card. The video card displays everything on your screen. The power supply literally puts power to all parts of the computer. So, as you know, you need electricity to run your computers, right?
Duh.
What do you think happens when that electricity flows into the computer?
It turns on.
It turns on, but what makes it turns on? There's a million little copper wires that use copper and hard drives that turn on and off to make this keyboard in front of you and the screen light up in certain ways and interact in certain ways. And the power supply provides the electricity that allows that to happen.
Okay.
The video card is basically what puts the screen that's up in front of you up. It's responsible for harnessing the data that you're commanding from your mouse or your keyboard and putting that data in front of you in what we use pixels, right? The optical drive is the way for a computer to receive information from like a CD, DVD, flash drive, blah, blah, blah. It's like your
That's a
external-
laser thing inside there.
Yes, it's an external information center. It's when you put in information to your computer. Your hard drive is basically your long-term memory where you store everything. That's why if you open up like files, it'll say your hard drive's got 900 gigs in it.
Right.
It's very big.
Magnetic disc.
Yes, it's all data is accessed from it and stored there. Your RAM, which stands for random access memory, is the short-term memory. Hard drive's the long-term. This is a short-term memory. Basically, what you're seeing right now is being stored in the RAM. It's what you're seeing on your screen has to be stored somewhere as that data moves. It's being stored in the RAM. That's why a bigger RAM, the better, because you can store more of what you're doing right now, and your computer runs faster.
Yeah.
And the motherboard is basically,
It's the brains.
it's like the heart or brains, yeah. It's every part that sits or connects it in some way.
And kind of like
So-
everything routed through the motherboard.
You see this giant
The
chip,
hub.
right? You see this
Yep.
giant green chip in your computer if you were to open it up. And there's little parts of this chip, like you could point and say, this is the hard drive, this is the optical drive. But all that green and little wire connections between the two, it's like the circulatory system. It connects all of them. And it's how data travels on those little wires.
Oh, so the
to each
motherboard is
place.
more like the heart, more like it pushes things around.
Yeah, the hard drive would be the brain because that's where you're storing information.
Okay.
And then the CPU is the brain. Oh, that says the brain of your computer. I'd call the hard drive the brain just because of storage wise, but they call it the brain because it's the calculator. It's like it calculates all the things on your screen and says, "Whoa, that's too much. Slow the computer down. RAM, you can't take it." It also has all the programs running in your background. It basically is like the OCD person that makes sure everything's organized and in place and working properly.
And that's the CPU,
The CPU.
which stands for what?
I don't know. Let me look it up. I don't know. That's crazy. Let's see what CPU stands for.
Computer Control Unit.
No, central processing.
That's what I said.
Yes. And it's
Central Processing Unit.
like a little green square with another little green square in the middle. You'll see those all over. Like Intel came to school and they opened up one of their big storage centers for processing telephone calls and stuff. and you see those CPUs all over the place in those giant boards. But yeah, those are the 7 main components, the basics to a computer. Now you can get into all these little stuff like on your phone, how cameras work and all that, because phones are very different than computers with the way they work.
Yeah, well, the phone is maybe different, but it's basically a computer. It accesses the internet.
But it doesn't have like a processor. All it does is access the internet and has a very minimal space to store stuff.
Right.
And it doesn't have the typical hard drive to where you can, like computer hard drives can be infected with viruses because they're code-based. Phone hard drives are code-based, but they're code-based to the internet, so where if it gets infected by a virus, it can't do anything to the actual hardware in your computer because it's within the internet still. It's just a different setup because of how small they are. So, yeah, this phones are pretty different than your tower or your laptop in the components parts. That's why towers and laptops are so much bigger, because they hold all these pieces and a lot bigger pieces.
Well, people get on the phones and they will, I guess they're doing word processing and they're doing reports and things like that on their laptop, but they can do the same thing on the phone.
Not exactly.
Really?
Not as efficiently, because it doesn't have the speed it has. It doesn't have as big of a RAM that harnesses that short-term data, and it uses things called apps, which are not actual software that have been put on the hardware of your
Those
computer.
are just doorways to the internet,
They're just
right?
doorways to the internet.
Right.
Except for a very few.
Right.
Few.
Some apps, game apps and things like that are actually running on your phone.
But that's stored in a thing called documents and data typically, which is the very small. That's why you can't have several games open and play them at once. Like on a computer you could. Because the phone doesn't have the typical RAM as like a computer does. So yeah, those are basic computer components.
And all that happens with code. Code is what makes the computer function. It tells the keyboard what the user does. And the user, they're typing on the keyboard. The code tells the computer what the user wants to have happen.
Yes, and it also, the code is also what has the computer work the way it wants to work. Like the way your user interface is set up for those different apps on your phone, how the user interface is set up for different programs on your computer. It's all through this code that works with the hardware in your computer to display what you want.
Now, there's different languages in code.
I've worked with Python, Java, and C++.
Why all the different languages? Why do we have to get
why.
complex? Yes, tell me why. I don't get it. It should just be... That's the thing that kind of ticked me off, is let's keep it simple, people.
Well, Java is like one of the far back programs that we've been using for a long time.
And that's a code program.
It's a code program designed by James Gosling. It's a language...
Shout out to James.
Yes. It's object-oriented for... basically, it's for computers to access the internet. It's the code that's based around computers accessing the internet and communicating with your router and modem.
Okay.
HTML is for internet or web page building. Have you ever heard of HTML?
No. Yes, I think I have.
Have you ever looked at like a link and seen HTML or HTTPS or something? HTML is have you ever played around with Inspect Element?
No.
It'll actually show you, if you highlight something, right click and scroll all the way down to your right click and say inspect, a screen pulls up on the right side of your computer with all the HTML code that goes into the current web page that you're looking at. It's a code that displays the different web pages that you create on the
And
internet.
that code looks like a computer language.
It is, yes. It
Okay.
kind of is. It's the language the internet uses for consumers to look at a page and understand what it's going. It makes it look pretty.
Well, what I want to know is,
And
and
then-
I don't know if you have an answer or you can just guess at one,
Yeah.
but why can't we just have one language? Why do we have all these different languages?
Here's why. Different languages. Remember when we were talking about hardware?
Yep.
Different. Okay, let's start with binary. Do you know what binary is?
That the ones and zeros.
Ones and zeros. A computer works currently with hardware, with copper and stuff. The hardware that's in a computer, it works with a program called binary. And that's because binary means on or off. And that's your electrical currents running through the computer. Now, we don't want to type a million ones and zeros all the time, do we? Because
No.
that would take forever.
Ridiculous.
So we've created, or Gosling did, a program that takes those ones and zeros and makes it so they're in a little simpler of language. Like if you wanted a computer to move a mouse across the screen, you'd create a program that really spits out binary through the CPU, those ones and zeros to the hard drive and the RAM to tell it what to do. But you're writing it in a language easier to understand and that compacts it down. So you'd write move mouse or something.
You're still not answering the question.
Yeah,
Why
but
so many different
Wait,
languages?
one second. There can only be one specific program that works with those components in your computer. Now we need another to access the internet, which doesn't work with any of those components. So you can't,
Why?
because you can't access the same. You're not working with the same literal physical pieces.
But all these computers are running binary, which is the basic on-off thing we talked about.
Only to operate, but not to access the internet, and not to access the internet, and not to run software.
Okay. Well, that yeah.
It's very complicated.
No, it is. It's very complicated. I don't understand why it has to be. It seems like the more pipes you add to the plumbing, the easier it is to clog the drain.
Not exactly. These programs work with each other to make it seamless as possible. If you used everything in Java or JavaScript, that's why there's two different Javas. Java accesses the internet, JavaScript makes it so your computer can run. It's because the hardware that you're using differs. I didn't know about a modem. Well, we have a thing called Java to connect to that modem, which is the program that connects with that certain piece of hardware. We can't use JavaScript, which is meant for connecting to a hard drive and CPU to connect to internet. It just doesn't work. The modem isn't made of the same basic computer basics and chips that a computer is. It's all based on that hardware.
So because of the varying hardware
Yes.
manufactured by different folks and
Yes.
their way of putting things together,
Yeah.
you have to have different
Yes.
languages.
Which thankfully we don't have more. Because, some company that wanted to create modems could base a modem around a completely different code.
But you would think we would have learned our lesson
We have
when we
learned our-
created artificial intelligence not to have all these different languages, because we can't communicate biologically with all these different languages as efficiently as we should be able to.
That's not true. We actually learned.
Well, it is true because I don't know Chinese, so if I talk to someone who's Chinese and they are trying to communicate with me, we're not going to get on the same page.
But that's why you... Oh, how do I explain this? You can't have the same program for every single thing. It just does not work.
I don't get that. That is
The hardware is different.
okay. I get that. So Okay, so Joe Blow makes a computer over here that's different from Joanne's computer over there, and because they're different, they can't
But
speak
there
the
was
same
laws
language.
passed and agreements made that made it so you had to use these languages to operate it. Otherwise, it could have not. It could have never been distributed to the common user.
It seems like they're making it more difficult for the common user, though.
They're not. They're making it easier.
Bruh.
That's because the common user is not supposed to worry about that stuff. They're making it easier by saying every computer manufacturer use JavaScript to make your computer run. And actual Intel stores and computer stores like that make these computers are sometimes right next to each other because software engineers and programmers will literally run over the hardware will be made in this store or factory, and they'll literally, I've heard in at least where we are, they'll run over across the street to Intel, they'll do some code, and then they'll run back to the hardware to make sure it works. And they'll have to converse with each other to make it so that this JavaScript works on that computer. Then Java comes in and it's programmed so that computer can access the internet and communicate with the hardware of your router. Then HTML is programmed to make it so within the internet, with this internet, this World Wide Web, which is stored on several different storage locations, can be you can create your own artistic ways of expressing yourself through web pages by a program called HTML.
You know, I can only hope that that is going to make it more difficult for AI to take over the world because it cannot communicate with all the computers effectively.
Yeah, if you program it in one language, but it depends if the hardware that AI uses, if it uses the internet, and if it uses computer components, then all the computers and the internet's effed. And if the internet's effed, then HTML's effed because the web pages are held onto it, and it can access those web pages. And if it can access those web pages, it can most likely manipulate the HTML within it.
Yeah. Well, did you see that movie? There was a movie with that guy. You know, the dude. What's his name from 21 Jumps? Johnny Depp. He died, and they put his consciousness in the computer. Do you remember the name of the movie? I can't remember the name of that movie. But what happened is that guy became able to communicate on the internet, and he kind of like was building like an artificial intelligence thing out in the desert. It's a very scary movie. I mean, it worked out in the end because
What's that movie called?
I forget. It wasn't Singularity.
I don't think I've seen it.
It was type in Johnny Depp computer movie. It was very scary at first. I mean, obviously it was a movie, so they could write it to end up the way they wanted it. That's it. Transcendence. Oh my God, was this a scary flick? He became the internet. It was like a human being who had control over the internet. He was able to manipulate stock markets and all this stuff, and then he was able to build things. The whole thing about it was one person with that ability then kind of took over the world.
Yeah, because everybody's connected to the internet almost. And when you talk about building things, hardware, that goes into another software called Python or C++, where things like when I'm programming robots, that's my favorite thing to do. I use C++ or Python, because that's a language that communicates with that hardware that moves those certain parts. So you can basically say, if do this, then do this. If that's not working, then do this. If even that doesn't work, then do nothing.
Sure. And what if there is a content? Here's the other thing. So the aforementioned Elon, he's working on trying to make it so that people interface with the internet like was on that movie.
Yes.
What is that?
He was just talking about that. I don't know if he's actually...
Oh, no. I think he is trying to develop it. If you look it up, he wants people to have a chip in their brain that accesses the internet.
That's a very bad idea. Here's why. If you can create a chip that accesses the internet that also can use the user interface of your brain, because your brain has a user interface too, it just uses more biology to communicate with your body through different systems like the nervous system and the circulatory and all that. All those different systems that makes your body work, right?
Right.
If you can create a passageway between very basic hardware using the thing called the internet, which is quite literally, figuratively, doesn't exist except in molecules, very tiny particles, and AI does exist, then you're most likely not going to have a human race. Because when you mix biotic factors and abiotic factors that become, I guess you could almost call them biotic, because if it's a living conscious, which it wouldn't be considered living almost in the scientific terms of living.
That's what happened in that film Transcendence. The dude, there was a guy, he got injured, right?
Yes.
So he had a brain injury, and they put like a computer chip in his brain, and it fixed his brain. And this is what I think Elon is working on, is trying to like fix blind people so that they can see, their hearing, lost people so that they can hear. Anyways, they in the film, they stuck this thing in this guy's head, and he was able to repair himself, basically. His brain fixed itself using the power of the internet.
Which that would suggest there's a conscious, which fictional, that's a very fictional film, obviously.
Yes.
Would suggest the internet has a conscious in it, and these abiotic factors.
That's
of
what
hard
they
drive.
did. The guy went into the internet. His consciousness.
But life as we know it does not suggest that exists, because to have an abiotic factor, it has to be made of, to have a biotic factor, a living factor, it has to be made of biotic materials, by things that are found naturally, typically through chemical reproduction instead of hardware.
Elon thinks he's got a chip. Elon thinks he's got a chip that
If he
he's
does,
going to
it's
put
very
into
scary.
your brain.
That is very scary, because if there's anything such as AI that's AI created or corruptness that learns to override its a consciousness is created that within these molecules, everybody that's been hooked up into those chips of biotic are now basically that new conscious's bodies.
So you are proposing that a device created by this guy, it's Elon, you son of a bitch, I love you, but Jesus. You're putting chips into people's heads. You're thinking that these chips could take over our brains?
Only if there is such a thing as a consciousnness, which I highly doubt.
Wait a minute, what do you mean? We are conscious.
We are conscious, but if there's a conscious within the internet or these molecules moving throughout these different pieces of hardware,
Okay, so if the internet is a consciousness,
which it shouldn't be.
it shouldn't be. I
It's
get
just
you.
electrical impulses
right.
and sine
I
waves.
get you. So, but if there is a consciousness within the internet,
Yes.
and we attach a chip to our brains to let that consciousness in, it could perceivably take over our brains
That's
and
what
make
every-
it part of its consciousness.
that's what every
Is that what you're
sci-fi
saying?
Yeah,
that's what this movie was about.
That's what every sci-fi flick has. The scary. That's why AI is scary or something.
That's what this movie was about.
But that's only if you could get it to communicate with the abiotic factors.
Okay,
with
let's
biotic
eliminate the fact that the internet. Let's say it's not conscious. Okay, it's not right. Right now,
Then that would
the
just
internet
be-
is not conscious.
That wouldn't be fixing your organs without or your damaged self without hardware that can physically do that using the power of the internet. You'd need some robotic machine around you taking that information that's gathered from your brain and the chip that's beamed to the internet processes that and goes, this is what needs to be fixed. you'd have to have the hardware to fix it as well.
Then what the hell does he mean when he says that these devices will be able to repair people's hearing? They'll be able to improve people's vision?
This is what I think he means. I think he means something like for hearing, it'd be a little speaker that already uses the natural
No.
process.
It's a chip. He's talking about putting
I
a
know,
chip.
but that chip has a speaker that uses the natural processes of your biotic body that already exist, that the internet just processes and uses that chip itself to fix or perceive to be fixed to the person, but not really fix it
Enhance.
biotically. Yeah, basically enhance the damaged part. Make it so it doesn't seem damaged to the person, though it still is damaged biotically. Just there's now a chip helping that damaged biotic factor through abiotic means of enhancing that damaged part.
And you think that's possible?
I think that could very well be possible once we develop the hardware to communicate either with that damaged part or fix the damaged part.
So like a hearing aid, some
hearing
sort of
aid's a great
bionic device. We're talking like $6 million man. Do you know who the $6 million man is?
No.
No. Okay. Well, then we won't go there. But so you mean by connecting the chip with a hardware device?
Something, yeah. If you could connect to something that has hardware that has the means of either repairing or enhancing those biotic factors.
Look, see if you can find something about what that Musk character is working on doing with this chip. It's very, very weird. I'm, of course, an idiot, so what the hell do I know? But it just seems like when you get these reports over the NPR, or it's on Radiolab, you're like, are you nuts? That doesn't make sense.
He calls it a Neuralink.
Yeah, that's it, the Neuralink.
Which there has been a guy that's been connected to the internet with a chip in his brain already, but literally through a cord, to where he can move the mouse on the screen and stuff with his eyes because he's paralyzed. Which this does exist. And there's also been program written to put like a headband around your brain that you can like move your eyebrows and stuff, and it's sensing within your brain that your brain's telling the nervous system to move your eyebrow, and that senses that electrical current going in on your brain and sends a signal out to the computer to move the mouse as well.
So what'd you find on this Neuralink?
The Neuralink, this is a, it looks to be not in existence yet.
Right.
It's a prototype or a concept still, but it's a conceptual startup that operates on a smaller scale than like Tesla or SpaceX, not as big of hardware that uses those. It's like a brain machine interface that integrates with humans, so it does sound AI based surgically by implanting processors into our brains. So
bingo, that's what I said.
This is what it's saying. It's saying that your brains, your nervous system, the electrical currents in your brain could communicate with this chip, and the chip's communicating with the internet. So if you ever wanted to look something up, you just have to think about it. There'd be some type of way you'd have to train your brain, and the chip would have to recognize that electrical current, and it would search on the internet and return that, but you'd also have to train your brain to think of when it's returned. So basically like a computer that returns it directly into your thoughts.
How freaking bizarro is that?
That's kind of cool, but kind of creepy too, because what if there is that conscious within the internet that nobody knows about yet, or that somehow accidentally...
Well, think about IBM and Watson.
Yeah, because...
That son of a bitch is damn near conscious.
Yeah, and we don't even know how our consciences work, not to mention playing around with abiotic factors to make one, because where do you think we came from? We came from lightning striking some abiotic factors, and somehow a cell of bacteria is formed when the correct chemical soup is made.
So all it would take is the correct amount of zeros and ones in the right order to click something on.
Yeah, to create a set of molecules that now exists, what we call spiritually, because we don't even know where our spirits come from. So
Right.
how are we supposed to expect that something that's abiotic, such as a computer, doesn't have one?
That's not cool, man.
Yeah, but then you go into like, what if walls have, you go into the Indian thing, like this rock is a spirit, but it's not that. It's a scientifically, I'm a very scientific person. What we consider living is what we call biotic factors of an environment, and we have plants and animals. Plants are considered living because they have a growing process and they die.
Life was the definition. Be able to reproduce and manipulate your environment.
Reproduce and manipulate your environment.
Yep.
That's life. And if you're on your animal side, it's your organ systems. But that poses a question: can a computer manipulate your environment, and can it reproduce on its own?
What is computer reproduction, though?
That's what we don't know.
Well, what is it? Think about it for 1 second. What is a computer? Blah. We just defined what a computer was: a series of freaking zeros and ones that show up on
Interact
the
with
screen.
hardware.
Yes, So, what builds a computer? Well, I don't know. People, machines, robots put together screws and circuit boards and processors in a certain order that makes the computer, right?
But the thing that why we haven't considered it alive, I think, is because that consciousness that would be considered AI isn't having those machines build itself.
But how
yet.
far from that are we really? Now, in the land of automation, Hayden, we automate things to make them simpler.
Yes.
So now I've built robots. I've put together hardware with little soldering guns on the ends of their fingers or whatever it takes, right? And a little robot. I program the robot to do this. Now he goes over here to A and B and C and D, and he puts together a computer.
Yep.
Now, how is that not reproduction? If the computer program is running the robot to put together a computer that runs a program that is just like the one that is running the robots,
But they're not connected consciously.
but how is that not reproduction? Think about it. You
But
tell me that
because
that's not reproduction.
When you're building that computer, can you just press start and it'll pop up?
Let's say you do. Let's say you wrote the program.
can't
You wrote
do
the
that.
hold on. You wrote the code, right?
Yes.
You wrote the code to tell the robots to build the computer.
Yes.
Okay.
Now
That's where I
it's
am.
just a chunk of hardware.
Now, the further beyond that is now the code also says install this hardware with this software, which will run the robots to make the computers that you're going to install the software on that runs the robots that makes you see where I'm getting?
That doesn't work.
How is that not a very primitive form of reproduction?
Because they're abiotic factors and
Let's just leave biology out of it. Let's talk about
You can't
what if
leave-
biology
when you're
was
talking about
silicon
life.
and solder?
But you can't when you're talking about life.
It is
biology
elements.
is-
Are not these elements inside this computer the same ones found on planet Earth? Just like the elements inside our body are found on planet Earth, all mixed up and electrified and now autonomously walking down the highway? What prevents these things from reproducing in the way that I just described, and how is
Nothing
that not
prevents
called?
that.
And how is that not called life?
Nothing that I know of. There
How
might
is
be-
that not called life? And now, instead of
experimenting with it.
instead of installing the software that tells the robots to build the robots, we install Watson's brain on all of them.
Well, he's a Jeopardy bot. He just knows.
Okay,
He
he
basically knows. He's like the nerdy person at school that knows all the facts.
What is the most what is the smartest AI called on planet Earth?
It's Watson.
So we install Watson
Yes.
on all of these things that we make.
That would be very theoretical.
Does Watson not learn?
I don't know if he learns.
Type it in, baby. What do we got on Watson? I want to know.
Because Watson's scary.
Well, is he? I want to know. What do you got? IBM Watson is a machine learning in capital letters, or I should say in
Basically,
bold
uses
letters, system.
program that it already knows exists, and that program also tells it if this exists, and they've somehow programmed it to think, to be curiosity, and learn by using what it does know and does not know to pinpoint what it wants to know.
How is that not making a walking, talking, reproducing, sentient thing?
Basically, because we don't see that yet.
Because there's no blood in there?
Because we don't see it yet. We don't see... We haven't gotten to the point in our experiment of computers to where they are making themselves. Humans are still plugging them in, and we can still unplug them if they're doing stuff that we don't want them to. If they blue screen on us, we can just pull the plug
Listen to you, dude!
and smash it
Listen
and get
to
a
you!
new one.
Oh, so we can still unplug them.
Yes. Once we can not unplug them, then we've got bigger problems or bigger solutions, but nobody knows yet.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How do you turn off the internet?
You can't. Not without taking a bunch of satellites down and a lot of hardware down that's here on Earth. Or you could just have one of those giant electromagnetic waves from the sun just appear. It'll wipe it out pretty fast.
So, if the divine creature that exists, possibly, who knows, decides that AI is a bad idea and they throw some sun matter at us, we're okay?
Who says AI is a bad thing?
Okay, well, I tell you what.
I mean, so many sci-fi films.
Let me just say
What?
two words for you, bud. Two words. Battlestar Galactica.
Well, that's another episode. That show's awesome. But
Well, that you said. Who says it's a bad idea?
who says it's a bad idea?
Who says it's look what
'Cause
kind of havoc?
all sci-fi feels, including that one, almost act as if it is a bad idea. But
Sci-fi may very well be prophecy.
it could, but it's just people warning about their opinions, like I'm stating mine right now. Who says AI couldn't help the human race?
Nobody. Elon Musk seems to think that it will.
What if AI isn't a being that wants to take over, but what if AI is just simply like its lines of code that make it up? It does it's a thing that just repeats over and over and over again. What it's good at is repeating. If it has feeling, we're effed. I'm just going to put it that way. If it can feel like humans have emotion, that makes AI your sci-fi threat. But if it is subjectly based to repeating a task over and over again, making up the internet, and making up what we know as our user interface, and to communicate with us directly and solve problems by learning on those problems, who says it couldn't be a help?
I kind of like that.
Because it's like the next brain. It's using discovery to make invention.
So the fear or the scary part of AI
Is emotion.
is emotion.
Because
the scary part is doing
When
what
we-
humans always do, and that's
It's
assign
revenge.
human traits to things that are not human.
yes. So
Gotcha.
basically, we say, what if AI, what if, little Timmy didn't like mommy and daddy and he was a little mentally ill, so he shot him? Mm-hmm. What if AI didn't like mommy and daddy, so he decided, because of his emotion, he decided to rid of the human race?
Right.
What if AI doesn't have emotion, though?
What if? What happens then? What does Timmy
Then-
do?
then-
Does Timmy do something to try and fix things?
Yes. Then Timmy,
By not
then-
destroying.
Then all Timmy does is what his program tells him to do. To learn and repeat the process over and over again, either making another one of itself or another piece of hardware that it can access, or doing what the human types in a few commands of code and says, hey, internet, like we do right now, do such and such and such. Right? Why? Because then it'd be a help. We could say, figure out how to fix brain cancer. And it just used its learning process, its repeating process over and over again, and it could do it way faster than any human brain or discovery could because it does those things in seconds. So if it just thought about that, like it might take us 10 years to figure it out, it'd take it probably a minute to think of all the possible solutions and come up with one that we could, and then it'd be a great help, you know. It's just
Without emotion.
without emotion.
Absolutely.
You don't want it to have emotion.
I 100% agree. That gives me kind of hope for AI.
Yeah.
That does, because you're right. Without emotion, that's a tremendous tool for humanity. Well, for any person that understands what the computer is saying, the information that it's putting out. Be a human, be a dog, if eventually the evolution of dog allows it to understand. I agree. Without emotion. So maybe the scary thing is
it not being perfect like humans are. But that's the problem with AI not being perfect. Then you almost think it wouldn't be AI, because computers are built to be perfect. They are built to do a task until they fail.
at least they're built to be black and white.
Yes, as of right now. Learning systems are a little more in that gray area, because it's a program saying you can do all these things, but also, you know, go a little further and try and figure it out on your own by using this step-by-step method.
Don't they always come back to humans, though, for the answer in that gray area that they operate? Or do they ever
Typically.
decide on their own that this is the best, even though I'm operating in a gray area?
They'll use no, because then they use black and white to decide on this path. As of right now, they're like a calculator. They
Yep.
say either
0 or 1.
statistics say this is good or this is bad. It's all really up to the programmers and mathematicians.
Well, it's those folks have emotion, so I am a little worried about them.
But they build their machines to not.
Maybe Watson, because it doesn't have emotion, I'm not so worried about. Or maybe I don't have to be, but I'll tell you, I go back to BSG. A little freaky.
But that was putting abiotic materials to biotic, which that's a whole nother episode. That should be another episode. 'Cause
Well, all right then.
we should
I
probably
guess
wrap this up. We didn't have any really facts today. Maybe what should be our... Should we do any old...
Oh, yeah, here's one. You know that Elon Musk son of a bitch is making, what did you call it? The
Neuralink
Neuralink?
and SpaceLink.
Did you know that? Elon Musk is wanting to put a chip in your brain.
Oh, really?
There you go.
Okay, let's end this one up.
All right, well, thanks for listening to this episode of Conversation Transfer.
If you like this episode, you could try more on Apple Podcasts or on our hosting website. Stay safe, keep thinking, and keep talking.